Take heed that no man deceive you. Take heed that no man deceive you.
Lately, they've been talking about bird flu a lot. And let me just give you guys like a quick disclaimer. I'm not making any claims that this is guaranteed to be the next thing that they pull off or whatever, but we do know for a fact that they're planning something. And none of us know exactly when they're going to pull it off, but we do know that they're planning on pulling something big off eventually, because, that's their plan, obviously. So, yeah, I'm going to get right into it right now. And yeah.
And speaking of the pandemic, are we heading towards another pandemic? Is bird flu going to cause the next pandemic? Let me tell you what a US expert has said. He has suggested that bird flu could potentially be the next pandemic. Who is this expert? His name is Robert Redfield. And who is he? He is a former CDC director. CDC is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It is the National Public Health Agency of the United States. So if a former director of the agency is saying that, the warning absolutely cannot be taken lightly. He was speaking to US-based TV network News Nation. He has basically said that he really does think it is very likely that we will at some time. It's not a question of if, it's more a question of when.
Yeah, it's not a question of if, but when, because it's not if it's going to happen, because it's guaranteed that something is big is going to happen. Another event similar to what we saw in 2020 is going to happen. It's not even a question. The question is when, right? Which we don't know. The only people that really know are the people who are planning this, right? But of course, Robert Redfield, right? Who's just another puppet, of course. Of course, he's on board with their agenda and whatnot. He's just a puppet for them. But yeah, I mean, when you hear people like him and Bill Gates and all these other people talking about the next, basically worldwide scam that they're planning on pulling off, like every single time you hear these people talk about it, they're smirking, they're giggling, especially Bill Gates, right? They're smirking, giggling, right? Because the reality is, well, I'm not even going to get into that. I know nowadays the censorship is so ridiculous. I'm not even going to get too in detail with that. But you guys know what I'm talking about, for those of you guys who have done your research and who are well aware of what these criminals are doing behind closed doors. But yeah, I mean, this would be a perfect excuse for them to really, wipe out the animal products in these stores and whatnot, and to reduce the overall supply of it, because they could easily be like, oh, this thing is killing all these chickens and stuff, and all of a sudden you hear about egg shortages and stuff like that, right? Not saying it's guaranteed, but I mean, we have heard about so-called egg shortages happening, right? And egg prices these days are ridiculous, and so same with meat prices and dairy. So yeah, the agenda is very clear, guys.
Will have a bird flu pandemic. He also pointed out that the mortality rate from bird flu is likely to be much higher as compared to COVID-19. That's how serious this is. Just for context here, bird flu has infected mammals like seals, raccoons, bears, cattle, primarily due to contact with infected birds. Scientists are on alert for changes in the virus that could signal it is adapting to spread more easily among human beings. According to the World Health Organization, the current risk of bird flu virus to the general population is low. And by the way, 24 companies are working to develop an avian flu vaccine for cattle as the virus spreads among US dairy herds. This is as per the Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack.
Developing, what's for it. Yeah. You know what the agenda is with that too.
According to the US Department of Agriculture, bird flu has infected 90 dairy herds across 12 states since late March. 3 dairy farm workers also have been infected with the virus, 2 in Michigan.
Oh yeah, that's right. And they're also claiming that that there's people that are actually catching this thing now too. So it's very possible it could lead up to what we saw in 2020. I'm not saying that this is guaranteed what they're going to go with for the next scam event, but because it could be anything. Like, they got so many different things they could just pull out of their sleeves. Like, it's not even funny. But yeah, I mean, you guys get the point. You know, the next scam event, it's going to be a lot more tyrannical. It's not a matter of if, because we know it's guaranteed to happen. We just don't know when it's going to happen. But yeah, I'm going to get into the next thing that I wanted to share with you guys, and it's this article. And it says, former CDC director predicts bird flu will be the next you know what. The report says, came out a few days ago. It says, will bird flu be the next you know what? According to a report, former CDC director Dr. Robert Redfield recently said it's not a question of if, but when. In the last 2 years, millions of wild and domestic birds worldwide have lost their lives to it. That's what they're claiming. But it has hardly affected people. Yet Redfield told News Nation Brian Enton on Friday he believes bird flu will enter humans and that it could have quote unquote significant mortality. The CDC has said it is extremely rare for the you know what to spread among humans. The you know what has also been detected in dozens of cattle across the country, and the World Health Organization last month identified what they're saying was the first human death in Mexico City. I really do think it's very likely that we will at some time. It's not a question of if, it's more a question of when we will have a bird flu event. Redfield, who was CDC director from 2018 to 2021, told News Nation. He also pointed out that bird flu has a significant mortality when it enters humans compared to the you know what. The mortality is somewhere between 25% and 50%. He told News Nation the death rate for you know what was 1.1% during the height of the scam, according to Johns Hopkins, which was also involved in the Event 201 exercise that they did months before the 2020 scam took place, where they literally simulated what would have taken place in 2020 during a scenario like that. But yeah, for those of you guys who have researched, you know, those exercises and those things that they've done in advance before they carried out these events, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Event 201 is well documented. Of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were involved with that too. It says avian influenza or bird flu is an infection from a type of influenza that usually spreads in birds and other animals. The virus usually spreads in birds but can also infect humans if they come into contact with an infected animal's body fluid. People who work with poultry, waterfowl, and livestock are most vulnerable to catching it. Yeah, I don't buy any of these BS narratives because this is all just fear porn garbage. And this is just, like I said, this is something that they could easily use as an excuse to like significantly reduce the supply of animal products like eggs and meat and stuff like that. Because they can easily just keep running around with the narrative like this and being like, oh, it's posing a threat to animals and it's starting to endanger humans and all this nonsense. Like, you guys know how far these people take this stuff, like, literally. I mean, but yeah, I'm not gonna read through the whole thing. You guys get my point. I've been saying this for so long. I've been saying this for like 4 years now, almost 5 years. But they're planning another scam, and it's not a matter of if, but when it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. We just don't know exactly when. And we don't know exactly, which narrative they're going to run with. We don't know if it's going to be this or some other disease X that they could pull off or whatever. It doesn't matter what narrative they run with, because at the end of the day, they're going to carry these things out regardless. But the most important thing is to prepare yourself in advance for it, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And, don't get distracted. Don't get too caught off guard. Don't fall into the idea that everything's going back to normal, because it might really seem like that's the case right now. It might seem like it, but it's really not.